In a kingdom full of happiness and joy, the king and queen lived. They dreamed of only one thing, to have a child. When they had already lost all hope, their daughter was born. She was very sweet and beautiful. On this occasion, a great celebration was arranged, and many guests were invited to the palace, among whom were good sorceresses. They were given the warmest, most cordial welcome. But the king and queen made a big mistake. They forgot to invite another sorceress. She had not left her tower for many years, and everyone thought that she had died long ago. When the time came to give gifts to the princess, the fairies generously rewarded her with beauty, a kind heart, intelligence, a beautiful voice, the ability to dance and play various musical instruments. When the turn came to the last sorceress, an evil fairy, whom they forgot to invite to the holiday, unexpectedly entered the hall. Cutlery was immediately brought for her, but she felt that she was not received as respectfully as she should have. Pulling the goblet and plate away from her, she muttered a spell. The sorceress wished that on the day of her 16th birthday, the princess pricked her hand with a spindle, and from this she died. The queen wept bitterly at the wish of the evil sorceress, and the king ordered to seize the witch. But she had already disappeared with an ominous laugh. Fortunately, the last of the fairies has not yet had time to say her wish to the princess. She could not undo the spell, but promised that the girl would not die, but would only fall asleep deeply until she was awakened by the kiss of love. The king immediately ordered the destruction of all spindles in the kingdom. And then came the day of the princess's 16th birthday, the day that the evil fairy spoke about. The princess grew up to be a beautiful and kind girl. The king ordered 3 sorceresses to watch over her. Fairies guarded her like the apple of an eye. On this day, the king and queen locked the girl in a room to prevent a terrible event. But the princess did not want to be locked up. Suddenly, a door appeared in the wall of her room, which the girl had never seen. She heard strange sounds outside the door. Burning with curiosity, and not knowing what awaited her, the girl entered her. The door led into a dark room in which a woman was sitting with her back to the princess. She was spinning. The girl had never seen a spindle in her life. She became curious. The princess went to the spindle, touched it, pricked her finger and fell into a deep sleep. And that woman turned out to be an evil fairy who was very happy that her spell had come true. Now everyone called the princess Sleeping Beauty. Upon learning of the misfortune, the kind sorceress decided to put the king and queen and the whole kingdom to sleep until the girl awakens. Soon, such impenetrable thickets of trees and thorny bushes grew around the castle that no one could get through such a thicket. 100 years later, a handsome prince from another kingdom went hunting. Seeing from afar the towers of the abandoned castle, he remembered the old story about the Sleeping Beauty that his parents had told him. And the prince decided to get inside. He struggled to make his way through the impenetrable thickets of trees and thorny bushes. But in the end, the prince approached the gates of the abandoned castle. He walked around the entire castle, and looked into the throne room. There the prince saw the king and queen sleeping. Then, in one of the rooms, he noticed Sleeping Beauty. She was sleeping on a bed decorated with flowers. The prince went to the bed, looked at the beautiful princess, and felt love fill his heart. He could not restrain himself and kissed Sleeping Beauty. And at that moment, she opened her eyes and saw a handsome prince. The king and queen also woke up, as did the whole kingdom. They were overjoyed. And in honor of the bride and groom, the most beautiful wedding that the world has ever seen was arranged right there. Since then they have lived happily ever after.
Once there was a woodcutter with 2 children and their stepmother. The boy's name was Hansel, and the girl's name was Gretel. They lived so poorly that sometimes there was not even anything to eat. And then one evening he lay in bed, pondering how to feed the children further. His wife advised him to have children in the forest, light a fire, give a piece of bread each and leave them there, not all 4 of them die of hunger. But the woodcutter did not agree. And until then, his wife persuaded him that he finally agreed. And the children, because of hunger, also could not sleep and heard everything that their stepmother said to their father. And when the parents fell asleep, Hansel secretly rushed out of the house. The moon was shining brightly, and the white stones glittered like coins. Hansel pocketed as many of them as he could fit. Then he returned home and the children went to bed. In the morning, the stepmother came to the children, gave each of them a piece of bread, and they all went to the forest together. On the way, Hansel threw out white stones one by one. When they arrived at the clearing, my father began to light a fire. He ordered the children to sit near the fire and make sure that it didn't go out, while they and their stepmother would go for more firewood. They sat, tired, and fell fast asleep. When the children woke up, it was a dark night all around. And when a full month had risen in the sky, Hansel took his sister by the hand and went, looking for the way through the pebbles, which glittered like new coins, and showed them the way. They walked all night long, and at dawn they came to their father's house. Some time passed. And the children again heard how the stepmother one night began to beg their father to get rid of the children. He refused, but his wife did not want to listen to him. She cursed and expressed all sorts of reproaches to him. When the parents fell asleep, Hansel, like the last time, wanted to collect stones, but the stepmother locked the door and the boy could not leave the house. Early in the morning, the children were given a piece of bread each, even less than the previous time. On the way to the forest, Hansel shredded his piece in his pocket and threw the crumbs on the ground. The stepmother took them even further into the forest. Again a big fire was lit, and the father ordered the children to watch the fire while they and their stepmother chopped some more wood. When lunchtime came, Gretel shared her piece of bread with Hansel. And they fell asleep. We woke up when the dark night fell. And then a month came up, and they got together on their way, but they could not find a single crumbs, because thousands of birds fluttering in the forest had long been eating those crumbs. So the children walked for a very long time, but they could not get out of the forest. Suddenly, the road led them to the hut. Coming closer, the children saw that the house was all built of bread and biscuits, and the windows were made of pure sugar. Hansel reached up and broke off a piece of the roof, while Gretel went to the window and began gnawing at its windows. And then the door in the hut opened wide, and the old woman came out, leaning on a crutch. Hansel and Gretel were so scared that they even dropped their tidbits from their hands. And the old woman was kind and invited them to her hut. There was already abundant food on the table: milk, cookies, apples, and nuts. After dinner, the old woman made 2 clean beds for the children, and Hansel and her sister thought they were in heaven. But the old woman only pretended to be affectionate, but in fact she was an evil witch, who built her bread hut for this purpose in order to lure children. Early in the morning, while the children were sleeping, she took Hansel and put him in a small cage. And she ordered her sister to do everything that the wicked witch demanded of her. The old woman decided to fatten the boy in order to eat him later. So Gretel began to cook the most delicious food for Hansel, and she herself got nothing but leftovers. Some time passed, and the boy did not get fat. Then the old woman did not want to wait any longer, and decided to cook and eat Hansel. She ordered Gretel to light the stove and apply water. When the stove warmed up, the old woman ordered her to climb into the stove and see if it was hot enough. So she wanted to push the girl into the fire and bake her. But Gretel knew what was on her mind. She said that she did not know how to get in there, and asked the witch to show herself. The old woman got angry and climbed into the oven. Then Gretel pushed her and slammed the shutter behind the witch. Wow, how terribly the old woman howled then. Gretel, meanwhile, rushed to Hansel and opened the cage. Having freed their brother, they went to the witch's room, in which there were boxes of pearls and precious stones in all corners, filled their pockets with them, and went home. For several days the children were looking for their way back. The forest seemed more and more familiar, and at last they saw their father's house in the distance. How glad he was to see his children alive. Hansel and Gretel poured on the floor all the pearls and gems they had taken from the witch. There was no need to think about food. And they began to live, and rejoice. And the father drove the evil stepmother out of the house.